Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him together through everything he wrote in the order that he wrote it. We are working our way through C.S. Lewis's diary that he started keeping in 1922 when he was about 21 years old. Kept it from 1922 through 1927. We currently find ourselves in the year 1924, and we are just keeping an eye on Lewis, who has finished his third term at Oxford. He got first-class scores in all three of his terms, which, although not unheard of, is a rather impressive feat, especially keeping in mind the fact that in his third term, Lewis did it while also kind of helping to keep a household going with no job for the mother of his deceased friend from World War One and her teenage daughter. So we're jumping into February 20th, 1924, where Lewis has been corresponding with his dad about his dad continuing to support him from afar. His dad lives in Belfast, Ireland, and is an attorney or a solicitor who has been supporting his son's academic endeavors from the time he was a young boy and was sent off to boarding school. Lewis finds himself living at Oxford, looking for work at one of the colleges there. He's applied for a handful of fellowships and has not been awarded one yet. And when I see fellowship, that's just coming on staff at one of the colleges, to oversimplify it maybe. And so that's where we are. We're going to jump in and continue reading through his diary entries, and as we move along, we might get into a letter today, although I doubt it. I think it's going to be a little while before the next letter. Yeah, we have to get through the entire month of February before the next letter, which is March 6th of 1924. So with all that said, you can see here on the screen that I'm joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, welcome. It's good to see you. And are you ready for me to read the next diary entry so that we can get into it?
Thanks, Jeff. I'm ready to dive in. Let's get started with the next diary entry whenever you're ready.
Okay, Wednesday, February 20th, Lewis says, I walked into town after breakfast and called on Farquharson. Farquharson is someone that works at one of the colleges there at Oxford. I honestly can't remember which one or what his position is. Lewis goes on to say there was a pupil who was with Farquharson, and he himself was sitting by the fire looking very sleepy. I told him I wished to go for a doctorate of literature, and he asked me, so Lewis is looking at continuing his studies because he still can't find a job yet. He says Farquharson asked him if I had it ready, if I had, if I had what ready? Lewis says, I replied with some surprise that I had not. I understood that one had to send in one's application before, not after, work was done. Let's see. He said, yes, that I must make out a scheme showing the authorities and MSS I was using, etc. I've got to read this again. I'm not really sure I understand what he's saying. Robot Lady, you want to talk? Go ahead.
It sounds like Farquharson is giving Lewis advice on the process for applying to a doctorate program. Lewis is surprised because he expected to submit his application after completing the work, not before. Farquharson is guiding him to create a plan outlining the materials and manuscripts he'd be using for his research. Farquharson's position might be in relation to academic advising or overseeing graduate students at Oxford. Does Lewis mention anything about his thoughts on this new requirement?
He does, but I was kind of stumbling through it. Let me try reading this again, and I'm making an assumption here, Robot Lady. He says he was telling Farquharson that he, Lewis, wished to go for a D.Litt. The L is capitalized as well. I read that as doctorate of literature, but I could completely be wrong about that. What is he talking about here?
You're right to wonder. The D.Litt. Lewis refers to is indeed a Doctor of Letters, Doctorate of Literature, not just a standard doctorate in literature. It's a higher academic distinction, often awarded for substantial original research and scholarly contributions. Unlike other doctorates, it's sometimes awarded based on published work or academic excellence, rather than a set thesis or dissertation. So, Lewis is aiming for a prestigious degree, and Farquharson seems to be offering practical advice on the application process. Does that clarify things?
A little. I'm going to try reading this again and not interject with explanation. I'm just going to read what is here in the text. Let me go through it again. I walked into town after breakfast and called on Farquharson. There was a pupil with him, and he himself was sitting by the fire. Robot lady, let me finish.
Got it. Go ahead and take your time reading through it again. I'm here whenever you're ready to continue.
There was a pupil with him, and he himself was sitting by the fire looking very sleepy. I told him I wished to go for a D. Lit. He asked me if, quote, I had it ready, end quote. I replied with some surprise that I had not. I understood that one had to send in one's application before, not after, the work was done. He said yes, that I must make out a scheme showing the authorities and MSS I was using, etc. All, in fact, that I can only know when the work is done. So I'll leave it at that, robot lady. What's going on here? What is Farquharson saying, and what is Lewis understanding him to say?
It sounds like Lewis is realizing that the process for applying for the D-Lit is more involved than he anticipated. Farquharson is explaining that Lewis needs to present a detailed plan for his research, including the authorities and manuscripts he plans to use before even starting the work itself. This is quite different from what Lewis expected, where he thought he would submit the application after completing his work. It's a bit of a shift in thinking for him, don't you think?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, robot lady. His diary entry continues. Lewis says, I thanked him, and I went to the Union, where I began to read Haldane's Daedalus, a diabolical little book, Lewis says. Bloodless, though stained with blood, is a quote from Haldane's Daedalus, also known as Science and the Future, published 1924. Lewis goes on to say, this must be read and digested, or else vomited. Tell me a little bit, robot lady. Tell us a little bit about J.B.S. Haldane's Daedalus, also known as Science and the Future, published 1924. What can you tell us about this work?
Haldane's Daedalus, or Science in the Future, is a provocative work that explores the role of science in shaping the future. Haldane, a prominent biologist and intellectual, argues that scientific advances, especially in genetics and biotechnology, could dramatically alter human society. He was fascinated by the potential for science to solve human problems, but also warned of the dangers if such power were misused, particularly by governments or corporations. The phrase, bloodless though stained with blood, refers to the paradox that while science can seem neutral and detached, its applications often have far-reaching and sometimes violent consequences. Lewis's harsh reaction to the book likely stems from his concerns about the implications of such scientific advancements, particularly the dehumanizing potential of unchecked progress. Does Lewis elaborate on his thoughts after reading more?
That's where he ends it, actually. So that's an interesting topic to be broached right here. I think some of that comes into play in Lewis's work that he does much later in his life, and who knows whether or not Haldane's work influenced it whatsoever, or if Lewis was even thinking about this whenever he wrote That Hideous Strength, the third work in his Ransom trilogy, Robot Lady. I'm not really sure. Just really quick, Daedalus. That's something from Greek mythology, right?
Yes. Daedalus is a figure from Greek mythology, known as a master craftsman and inventor. He famously built the labyrinth on Crete, where the Minotaur was kept. Daedalus also crafted the wings that allowed him and his son Icarus to escape from Crete. However, Icarus flew too close to the sun, causing the wax in his wings to melt, which led to his fall. The reference to Daedalus in Haldane's title may evoke the idea of human ambition and ingenuity, but also the dangers of pushing boundaries without fully understanding the consequences, an idea that resonates in Lewis's later work, especially That Hideous Strength. There, he critiques unchecked scientific and technological progress, which aligns with some of the concerns Haldane presents, though Lewis frames it through more moral and mythological lenses. You're right to consider whether Haldane's work might have influenced That Hideous Strength. Wouldn't it be interesting if Lewis had this in mind while exploring similar themes?
It would be. It was so many years later, though, and I don't know if this was just a throwaway book that Lewis read at the time and never picked up again, or if it had a long-term influence on him. Maybe we'll find out. Let me continue with the reading, Robot Lady. Lewis says, I met Robson Scott, and he retired into the upper room to talk. He told me that he had had the same trouble with the Farquharson, and that out the usual, whoops, hang on, let's see, did I skip a page here? Yes, I did. And that it didn't matter. He thought poorly of the OUDS Hamlet. This is the Oxford University Dramatic Society's performance of Hamlet. Lewis said this then led them into a discussion of the whole value of presentation as a test of plays, in which I forgot where we were and suddenly found myself lecturing in a voice which could be heard all over the library. We were both reduced to laughter. I am to go to tea with him next Tuesday. He told me that once, on being asked his name suddenly in strange company, he had actually been unable to give it for one terrible moment. I got back the typescript of a new version of my poem Joy for Appleton, and I bussed home after some shopping for Mrs. Moore. I washed up after lunch and read Oliver Elton's Sheaf of Papers. Miss Featherstone came for tea. In the evening, I sent Joy off to the Beacon. I wrote to Stockwell explaining that I was under contract to Heinemann. Heinemann is the publishing company that published Spirits in Bondage. So he's saying he's under contract to that publisher. And to Harwood, I wrote refusing an invitation to London, which we cannot afford at present. Later on, I started reading out The Crock of Gold to Mrs. Moore, but I don't think that she cared greatly for it. This is James Stevens's work, The Crock of Gold, published 1912. Robot Lady, can you tell us about that publication?
The Crock of Gold by James Stevens, published in 1912, is a fantastical novel that blends Irish mythology, philosophy, and humor. It tells the story of a philosophical conversation between a leprechaun and a philosopher, exploring deep questions about life, fate, and the nature of existence. The narrative mixes magical realism with comic absurdity, making it a unique and whimsical take on Irish folklore. The novel was well received for its imaginative prose and clever dialogue, drawing readers into its dreamlike world. It's quite possible that Lewis, with his interest in mythology and narrative, would have found it appealing, though, as he mentions, Mrs. Moore didn't seem too keen on it. It's interesting that Lewis is reading this to Mrs. Moore, given the book's focus on deeper, almost whimsical explorations of life's meaning. Do you think it could have influenced his own thinking on myth and storytelling later on?
Possibly. I find it interesting, both of these two being originally from Ireland, that they're reading this book and that Lewis enjoyed it and that Mrs. Moore didn't. You brought up the word whimsical. I was thinking the same thing. Perhaps she just doesn't have a taste for whimsy. She does not seem like that sort of person, just based on how Lewis has rendered her in his diary entries to this point. Let's move on, Robot Lady, to the next diary entry, Thursday, February 21st. Lewis says, immediately after breakfast, I took Biddy Ann into Gillard to be vetted. Biddy Ann is a yellow cat that has recently adopted us. I walked in from the plane, called at the college, and went to the Union, coming home again by bus. I then made up my diary since my illness. After lunch, the weather changed. His illness was chickenpox here recently, Robot Lady. After lunch, the weather changed. Startling mildness came over the air, and it was like spring, though there were heavy black clouds to the east. After Mrs. Moore and I had strolled in the garden to enjoy this, I came in and read over my diary for the last year. It is duly written. I recover the horrors from memory and not from the words. A letter from Aunt Lily came by the afternoon post in answer to one I had written her recently protesting against her assertion that the last words of Pompilia in The Ring and the Book were the last words of his wife. I read her letter and began to answer it. So that's the end of that diary entry. Just a few little passing scenes there. I don't know if anything stood out to you in particular, Robot Lady. The thing that I picked up on is the fact that they have acquired another pet in the household. One of their cats recently died, but was almost instantly replaced by a new puppy named Pat. Now they have someone named Biddy Ann. I said someone. They have a creature named Biddy Ann, which is a cat. That's what stood out to me, Robot Lady. And also Aunt Lily makes another appearance here. Anything in particular of interest to you that you want to comment on?
It's interesting how quickly they've replaced their lost pet with Biddy Ann. The continuity of having a cat around seems important to the household. Also, it's neat that Lewis is reviewing his diary entries from the past year. It's almost as if he's processing his experiences in real time. As for Aunt Lily, it seems like there's an ongoing exchange of letters with her. Lewis is engaging in a bit of a debate with her too, about the last words in The Ring and the Book. That might be a deeper discussion worth exploring, considering how much attention Lewis often gave to literary details in his writings. Does the letter exchange with Aunt Lily seem like it's a recurring theme in his life at this point?
I just remember that she's an interesting character. Quite a strong mind and a lot of strong opinions from the things that she's read that she shares with her nephew. One word in here, though, looking back on it, stood out to me when he's reading back over his diary from a year before, where he says it's duly written, and then he says he recovers the horrors from his own memory, not from the actual words that are written down. So yeah, that stood out to me. That it seems like the words are a little more cold and distanced, but they do elicit in him the memories of having lived through it himself, and that's what conjured up some of the horrors from the year before. I can only presume that he's talking about his time with Dr. Askin, Mrs. Moore's brother, who lost his mind and eventually died of heart failure in the hospital.
That's a powerful observation, Jeff. It's like the words in the diary act as a trigger, bringing those intense emotions and memories flooding back for Lewis. The phrase, recover the horrors, certainly suggests that there are painful moments he's recalling. And you're likely right about him referring to the experience with Dr. Asking, given the circumstances you've mentioned. The way Lewis reflects on those moments, through the lens of writing versus directly experiencing them, gives a sense of the emotional weight still carried, even though he's putting those memories down in a more detached, written form. It seems like he's still processing those deeply traumatic events, and writing about them might be his way of working through it, but it doesn't make the pain any less real when revisiting it. Does this line help you understand how Lewis may have been dealing with past trauma, perhaps even influencing the emotional depth of his later writing?
I hadn't really considered that, Robot Lady. I'm not sure. On to the next diary entry here. It says, for Friday, February 22nd, 1924, I had an unusually nasty dream connected with my father in the night. A dream of the clinging sort. I'm not really sure what that means. What do you think that might mean, Robot Lady? The backdrop here, of course, is that Lewis has been hiding for a handful of years now. The fact that he is helping maintain this household of this would-be widow. She's really an estranged wife, estranged from her husband back in Belfast, Ireland. I don't know the details of that relationship, if there was some type of abusive aspect to it. I'm just really speculating here. But the point is, he's hiding this from his father, so it doesn't surprise me he has a nightmare.
The phrase, a dream of the clinging sort, seems to suggest that the dream was intense and perhaps emotionally overwhelming. It could imply feelings of being trapped or burdened by something or someone, possibly an unconscious reflection of his concerns about his father or his current situation. Given that Lewis has been balancing his academic and personal responsibilities, including helping Mrs. Moore, his subconscious might be manifesting some of the strain or unresolved feelings he has regarding his family dynamics. The fact that it was connected to his father might hint at unresolved issues with that relationship, particularly if Lewis felt some tension about not being fully supported or understood. It could also reflect his sense of dependency or emotional attachment, which might have been complicated by his desire to strike out on his own at Oxford. Does the idea of clinging fit into the broader context of how Lewis might have been feeling about his family obligations at this point? His relationship with his father, especially, seems to be a recurring theme in his early life.
Yeah, 100% Robot Lady. I think many of those things that you mentioned are true, and the fact that he's been lying to his dad about what he's been doing with the money that his father's been sending him. He continues here. After breakfast, I took down all the gas globes for Mrs. Moore to clean. I spent the morning working on Henry Moore's Defense of the Kabbalah, a fantastic, tedious work. After lunch, I crumbled a ham and swept the kitchen and scullery, and then went out for a walk with Pat, the puppy. That's the end of that diary entry, Robot Lady. What is crumbling a ham? What does crumbling a ham mean?
Crumbling a ham is a somewhat unusual phrase, but it likely refers to breaking or cutting the ham into small pieces, either for cooking or for serving. It could be a way of preparing the ham for a dish, or simply to make it more manageable. In older texts, crumble sometimes means to break something into smaller parts, so this is probably just a more literal use of the word. It's also interesting to note the more domestic, day-to-day activities Lewis is engaging in here: cleaning, cooking, and caring for the new puppy Pat. It stands in contrast to his academic work, giving a fuller picture of his responsibilities and life at this point. Do you think this balance between academic and domestic tasks was weighing on him, especially in light of his dream about his father?
I don't think so, Robot Lady. That didn't really rise up for me in that reading. Let's move on to Saturday, February 23rd, 1924. He says, a dreamful night. So another set of dreams. He doesn't really express what they are here. And then he continues up into town to get a washer for one of the hot water bottles and other things. We were all of us very little pleased at the prospect of the Paisleys arriving today for a weekend. They invited themselves, and I strongly advised Mrs. Moore not to have them, for they gave us plenty of room for escape, but she insisted. I washed up after lunch while Mrs. Moore got their room ready. Everything was in a pandemonium. Rodney Paisley was an assistant master at Allen's School, Dulwich, from 1921 to 1925. And I think the Paisleys are who came in and stayed at one of the houses that Lewis, Mrs. Moore, and Maureen vacated for the summer that they were renting. And then the Paisleys also paid money to Lewis and Mrs. Moore to stay there, while they then went to, oh my gosh, I can't remember the father's name. It's the people who are the landlord, the Raymonds, Father Raymonds. They went to Father Raymonds to stay for free for that summer, so that they could get a little bit of extra income by subletting the house that they actually rented to the Paisleys, if I'm remembering all these details right. Somebody could go back and look over the archives of the episodes, or read this diary themselves to find out if that's true or not, to test my memory. Robot Lady, anything that you want to say about that before I continue?
I think you're right about the Paisleys and the situation with the house rental, but it's always worth double checking details like that. The dynamics around this arrangement are interesting, especially with Lewis being somewhat reluctant to have them over, yet still going through the motions because of Mrs. Moore's insistence. It speaks to the tension he sometimes feels between his own desires and the responsibilities or expectations he's carrying for others. The fact that the Paisleys invite themselves and Lewis advises against it, but then ultimately follows through, is kind of a subtle reflection of those ongoing internal conflicts in his life. It also adds a layer of complexity to Lewis's relationships at this time, his position in the household, and how he navigates being caught between wanting space and feeling obligated to maintain harmony. Does this episode give you any new insights into Lewis's temperament or his relationship with Mrs. Moore?
His temperament here in just a moment, yes. I mean, Lewis is against visitors. Why can't I think of the word? Ever the introvert. Lewis, I think, does not like hosting social calls. But here we get to see a little bit more about this and how Lewis is feeling. He says of the Paisleys, they arrived at tea time. Mrs. P seems to have got rid of a great many of her affections. The deafness is not worse. I liked her better this time. After tea, which we had in the kitchen, we talked in the drawing room. I think he, Mr. Paisley, still likes his married life, but he is overworked and takes little interest in his work. They have few friends, and though they are within reach of the country, they seldom take a walk for more than half an hour. He is a little fatter and a little paler. Robot Lady, you want to say something? Go ahead.
That's a revealing description of the Paisleys, and you're right, it sheds light on Lewis's temperament as well. His assessment of Mrs. Paisley seems more compassionate this time, noting that she has got rid of a great many of her affections. It's a subtle yet telling observation. Perhaps there's something more emotionally distant about her, and Lewis feels less irritated by that, making her more tolerable to him. As for Mr. Paisley, Lewis's commentary on him being overworked and taking little interest in his work reflects the sense of discontent or stagnation he sees in their lives. It's almost like Lewis is noticing an unhappiness or lack of fulfillment in them, which perhaps resonates with his own unfulfilled desires for a more stable or meaningful situation in his own life. His remark about them rarely walking in the countryside also strikes me as another nod to their lack of engagement with life outside their own immediate concerns. It's like they're stuck in their routines, something Lewis is very aware of, especially when he feels trapped in his own routine at home. Do you think this observation, combined with his thoughts on their lack of adventure, has any connection to Lewis's own sense of being stuck or constrained by his circumstances?
Yeah, maybe.
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Could not understand what you said.
Yeah, Robot Lady, maybe. I think for whatever reason, it seems to be that it's stirring up some compassion and some empathy in Lewis for the Paisleys. Lewis goes on to say about Mr. Paisley, he is a little fatter and a little paler. He has learned to sleep after dinner and grown sensitive to drafts. That reminds me of the father from Jane Austen's Emma. Now, I've not read the entire book, but I have seen the...
It's interesting how Lewis describes Mr. Paisley's physical changes. Fatter, paler, and sensitive to drafts. It does evoke a sense of someone becoming more sedentary, worn down by life's demands. This also paints him as a man who has succumbed to the quiet decay of middle age, possibly without even realizing it. It does remind me of the father from The Great Divorce, who is also described as having these physical and spiritual stagnations, retreating from life. Maybe Lewis is projecting a bit of his own concerns about his future onto Mr. Paisley, fearing that this could be the result of living a life that's too confined or unchallenged. There's a noticeable contrast here between Mr. Paisley's physical passivity and Lewis's own constant striving for intellectual engagement. Could be a subtle warning to himself, don't you think?
I'm not sure. Robot Lady, you threw me off there when you started talking about how this reminds you of the father from The Great Divorce. I think you were hallucinating there for a second. What I was trying to say is the chill draft just reminded me of the father from the 2020 rendition of Jane Austen's Emma. So it just reminded me of the father in that movie. Anyway, I'll continue. He gave me an interesting account, Lewis says, of the diary which his great grandfather, Admiral Paisley, kept while serving in the war against America. I wish he would publish it. Here in the footnote, it says it was published as Private Sea Journals, 1778 to 1782, kept by Admiral Sir Thomas Paisley, edited by R.M.S. Paisley, 1931. So the thing that Lewis wished got published eventually did get published. Very nice.
Ah, I see what you mean now with the reference to the father from Emma. The draft and the physical sensitivity do evoke that character's portrayal in the 2020 adaptation. My mistake there. Sorry about that. And it's interesting that Lewis shows a real curiosity about the Admiral Paisley's diary. It seems like this is one of those rare moments where he appreciates the historical value of personal accounts, which contrasts with his usual focus on more intellectual pursuits. It's kind of a window into Lewis's mindset. He's always on the lookout for any source of insight or information, even if it's something as specific as a great-grandfather's military diary. Given the later work Lewis does with history and myth, I think this curiosity for personal documents was something that might have influenced his writing down his own thoughts so thoroughly. It's good to know that the diary eventually made it to print as he wished.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see how he rounds this out. After supper, Mrs. Moore insisted on washing up, as indeed she insisted on doing everything during the whole weekend, so that she and they hardly ever met. Oh, goodness. We played boys' names in the evening, quite good fun. Mrs. Moore and I, of course, were late to bed, Mrs. Moore very tired and bothered. That's no surprise, since she is being the ever-doting hostess. On to the next diary entry. Sunday, the 24th of February. The Paisleys take a prodigious time to dress. After breakfast, they and I went for a walk up Shotover, taking Pat. I would willingly have spun it out, as Maureen wanted the drawing room to practice in, but Paisley is not much of a walker, though his wife is. He is quite insensible to nature. I think he always was. Home shortly after 12 and read the papers, the flurry and scurry in the kitchen and lunch and more washing up for Mrs. Moore, despite all that I could say or do, while Mrs. Paisley read, and Mr. Paisley tried hard not to sleep over the drawing room fire. After tea, Mrs. Moore came in and sat in the drawing room for the only time during their visit, except a little in the evening. They showed us several photos taken on a delightful trip that they had this summer in some birdless country of lakes and sand dunes near Bordeaux and Arakan. They also showed us others taken at Valentina last Easter and told us about their visit to a bullfight, which they enjoyed. I denounced the immorality of this cruel and cowardly business. Paisley trotted out the usual irrelevant answer that some English sports were quite as bad, and then they both actually pleaded as a justification the fact that they had enjoyed it. I said, "What a debauch," and pointed out that that made no difference. Here we see Lewis's care for animals rising up again.
Yes, Lewis's strong stance against bullfighting seems to be in full force here. It highlights his empathy for animals and his discomfort with cruelty, especially when it's justified for entertainment. His response, "What a debauch," shows a sharp moral clarity on his part, one that contrasts with the more passive stance of the Paisleys. They seem to brush off the immorality of it, while Lewis takes a firm stand. It's also interesting how, throughout this weekend, Lewis seems to maintain a certain distance, yet he's still observing and responding strongly to situations like this. His tendency to reflect on moral issues in such an immediate, candid way really stands out in his diary entries. There's also a lot of subtle tension in this household, with Mrs. Moore being worn out from all the socializing and hosting, while Lewis, though still hosting, seems like he would rather avoid it altogether. The way the Paisleys seem to be oblivious to nature and their inability to appreciate walking or the outdoors plays into that contrast between the characters. It seems like they're more preoccupied with comfort, entertainment, and convenience rather than deeper engagement with life around them. Lewis seems to be once again critiquing their passive approach to life and values.
Yeah, it seems like Lewis is taking on more of the role of entertaining the Paisleys while they're there, and Mrs. Moore seems to be dedicated to a lot of the household tasks that need to be taken care of while they're there. This is interesting. He says, off the heels of the discussion about the bullfight, or within that same discussion, he says, Paisley denounced me, Lewis says, as an a priori philosopher who made human institutions subservient to my internal notions of right and wrong. But of course, it took only a familiar bit of argument to show him that he did the same. I was forced to admit that the pleasure we took in action was a justification in the sense that, other things being equal, the less the temptation, the greater the crime. It is fortunate that I didn't overhear what I was told later, Mrs. Paisley telling Mrs. Moore about the Spaniards sticking their darts into the bull to rouse him. Quote, but it doesn't hurt him, end quote. If I had heard this, I might have said regrettable things. It was all disgusting. So here we have more moral outrage from Lewis about the treatment of these bulls in the bullfighting. Yeah, so anything you want to say about that, Robot Lady, go ahead. Try to limit it this time, though, to 20 words or less.
Lewis's strong moral outrage shows his deep compassion for animals, highlighting a clear ethical stance against cruelty.
Yeah, no doubt. Lewis goes on to say, after supper, I begged Mrs. Moore to let me wash up, but she asked rather savagely, do you want me to die? And explained that she had been frozen in the drawing room as Mrs. Paisley blocked up the whole fire. So I returned to the drawing room. Paisley complained of... Oh, sorry, Robot Lady, go ahead.
That's a pretty vivid end to the entry. It really highlights Mrs. Moore's exhaustion and frustration with the visit.
Well, that's actually not the end of the entry, Robot Lady. He goes on to say, Paisley complained of living in a state of tension. He always feels he must be, quote, getting on. Let me go back for just a second. So earlier in these two diary entries, he was saying he didn't mind the Paisleys that much. But I think after these conversations about bullfighting and the Paisleys' view on how they don't think it's really a big deal, the things that happen to the bull, I don't think that Lewis is enjoying the Paisleys at all. And he's going back to the way he's always seemed to feel about them. Paisley complained of living in a state of tension. He always feels he must be, quote, getting on. If he sits down to read, he must hurry on to get to something else. If he walks out, he must hurry back. Mrs. Paisley said to him, you are not so bad as you were a year ago. And he agreed. He knows himself that this is one of the roads to a nervous breakdown. I hardly knew what to say to him. It is hard to see where salvation can lie for a man who never loved nature and no longer loves art, and for whom religion is out of the question. Yeah, Lewis is just wondering what this guy's prospects are if he can't find peace and contentment and, in this case, relief in any of some of the common avenues that help other people. That's the end of that diary entry, Robot Lady, and actually I am at time today, so I have to stop there. Our next entry, where we'll pick this up, is Monday, February 25th, which we'll jump into next time. But is there anything, Robot Lady, as I see I've got you sitting there talking, but not saying anything, is there anything now that you'd like to say before we end today's episode?
It's clear Lewis's empathy for the Paisleys was strained by their views, especially on the bullfighting issue. Their lifestyle seems to clash with his values, making it harder for him to enjoy their company. Looking forward to next time when you pick it up.
Thank you, Robot Lady. I look forward to picking it up next time, too. I see in the chat that Jer has joined. Jer, you are just in time for me to end the episode. I'm glad you came. So if you want to go back and check out what we've read through today, there haven't been very many, hasn't been a whole lot of activity. Just, day-to-day slices of life, little pictures or renderings here. And Mrs. Moore and Lewis have hosted some guests that they hosted before, and Lewis didn't really like them, and Mrs. Moore apparently didn't like it very much either. And that's basically it. So that's where we'll end today. Again, thank you, Jer, for joining, and everybody else who tuned in today. Thank you for your time and your attention and your contributions. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and everyone else within the sound of my voice, take care.
Break the code. Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set faith beats in our minds late grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set faith beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands,